The dense jungle hummed with life as the morning sun struggled to pierce through the thick canopy above. Birds sang in melodious chaos while the rustling leaves whispered secrets to the wind. But amidst the vibrancy of nature, a lone figure trudged forward, his breath labored and his eyes scanning the unfamiliar terrain. 13-year-old Daniel Evans had never felt more alone in his life. It had started as an ordinary day. His parents had taken him on a wildlife safari during their vacation in Africa. The trip was meant to be an adventure, a chance to see the majestic creatures of the wild up close. But fate had other plans. When the Jeep made a sudden stop near a waterhole, Daniel had stepped out to capture a perfect shot of a drinking giraffe. In his excitement, he wandered a little too far, his curiosity pulling him deeper into the wilderness. A rustling sound startled him, and in his panic, he ran, faster and faster, until he realized he had no idea where he was. Now, lost in an endless expanse of jungle, Daniel's stomach growled as he clutched the camera still hanging around his neck. His throat was parched, his legs weak, and every sound around him sent shivers down his spine. He had heard stories about wild animals attacking humans, and the thought of being defenseless terrified him. But he knew panicking wouldn't help. He needed to find shelter, water, and somehow a way back to civilization. As Daniel trudged forward, the sky darkened with the onset of evening. Strange calls echoed from the trees, and the distant roar of a predator made his heart pound. He knew he couldn't stay out in the open. He needed a place to hide for the night. Spotting a large tree with a hollowed-out trunk, he climbed inside, curling up against the cool wood, his body trembling from exhaustion and fear. That night, Daniel dreamt of home, his mother's warm embrace, his father's laughter, and the safety of his bed. But the sharp snap of a twig jolted him awake. Peering outside, his eyes widened in horror. A pair of glowing eyes stared at him from the darkness. A leopard. Daniel's heart raced. The big cat moved slowly, its muscles rippling beneath its spotted coat. He knew that making any sudden movement could provoke it. Holding his breath, he remained still. But just as the leopard took a step closer, a deep, guttural growl echoed through the jungle. Daniel turned his head to see another beast, bigger, stronger, a lion. The massive lion's mane flowed like fire under the moonlight. As it let out a thunderous roar, the leopard hesitated before slinking back into the shadows, knowing it was no match for the king of the jungle. But Daniel's fear didn't subside. Now, he was at the mercy of the lion. Instead of attacking, the lion simply stared at Daniel with curious golden eyes. It sniffed the air, then turned its head as if listening for something. Without warning, it walked away, disappearing into the jungle. Daniel exhaled, his entire body still frozen in fear. Sleep was impossible for the remainder of the night. As soon as dawn broke, Daniel climbed out of the tree and continued his search for a way out. He needed water. Desperation made him push forward until he heard the distant sound of flowing water. Hope surged through him as he stumbled toward a small river, cupping the cool liquid in his hands and drinking greedily. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. A rustling in the bushes made him freeze. Turning his head slowly, he saw a group of hyenas emerging from the shadows. Their eyes gleamed with hunger as they surrounded him. Daniel's mind raced. He had read about hyenas. They were cunning, ruthless, and known for their pack mentality. He had no way to defend himself. Just as the first hyena lunged, a golden blur shot out of nowhere, the lion from the night before. With a deafening roar, it charged at the pack, sending them scattering. The hyenas yelped in submission before vanishing into the underbrush. The lion turned to Daniel, its massive form blocking the sunlight. For a moment, boy and beast locked eyes. Then, to Daniel's surprise, the lion began to walk away, but not before looking back at him, as if beckoning him to follow. Hesitant yet with no better option, Daniel followed the lion. It moved with grace, weaving through the jungle as though it knew exactly where it was going. Hours passed, and just as Daniel was beginning to question whether he had made a mistake, he spotted something through the trees, a watchtower. Excitement flooded through him. It was a ranger outpost. As he took a step forward, he felt something nudge his back. He turned to see the lion looking at him one last time before disappearing into the jungle. Daniel could hardly believe what had just happened, but there was no time to dwell on it. He ran toward the outpost, waving his arms frantically. Within minutes, rangers spotted him and rushed to his aid. Tears of relief streamed down his face as they gave him water and radioed for help. He was finally safe. But as the helicopter arrived to take him back to his parents, Daniel couldn't shake the thought of the lion, the guardian who had saved him. He promised himself that one day he would return to the jungle and find it again. Little did he know, his adventure was far from over. Ethan watched as David settled into his new life at the reserve. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between the young boy and the ranger grew stronger. David was fascinated by the wildlife surrounding him, particularly the lions. Every morning he would wake up excited, eager to see Scout and the other animals in their natural habitat. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ethan and David sat on the porch of their small home within the reserve. The warm breeze carried the distant roars of lions, a sound that no longer frightened David, but instead comforted him. It reminded him of the first day he met Scout, the guardian who had protected him when he was alone and scared. But their peaceful life was soon disrupted. One morning, Ethan received alarming news from his fellow rangers. Poachers had once again found a way into the reserve. This time, they were more aggressive, armed with sophisticated weapons and determined to capture some of the rarest animals for illegal trade. The safety of the reserve and all its inhabitants was at stake. Ethan knew he had to act fast. Along with the other rangers, he devised a plan to reinforce the perimeter of the reserve and set up surveillance in the most vulnerable areas. He also increased his patrols, often taking David with him to teach him about the importance of protecting wildlife. The little boy listened intently, his eyes shining with admiration for Ethan's dedication. One night, as Ethan was reviewing footage from the security cameras, he noticed something that made his heart pound. A group of poachers had entered the reserve under the cover of darkness. They were moving stealthily toward the watering hole, a prime spot where animals gathered at night. Without hesitation, Ethan grabbed his gear and radioed for backup. But before he could stop him, David clung to his leg, his small voice filled with concern. "I want to help," he pleaded. Ethan hesitated for a moment before kneeling in front of David. "I need you to stay here, where it's safe, but I promise I'll come back and tell you everything." David reluctantly nodded, and Ethan rushed out, his heart pounding as he drove toward the watering hole. As he approached, he turned off his headlights and navigated through the darkness, with only the moonlight to guide him. The sight before him made his blood run cold. The poachers had set up a trap, and within it was none other than Scout. The massive lion growled, pacing within the confines of the cage. Ethan clenched his fists. He wouldn't let them take away the lion who had once saved David. With careful precision, Ethan signaled his fellow rangers, who had arrived quietly. They surrounded the area, ready to take action. The poachers, unaware of the imminent danger they were in, continued their preparations to transport Scout. Then, with a swift motion, Ethan launched a flare into the sky, a signal for the rangers to move in. Chaos erupted as the poachers scrambled, but the rangers were well prepared. Within minutes, the men were apprehended, their illegal weapons confiscated, and their cruel mission thwarted. Ethan rushed to Scout's cage, his hands working quickly to release the lock. As the door swung open, the lion stepped out, his golden eyes locking onto Ethan's. There was a moment of understanding between them, an unspoken gratitude. With a final glance, Scout roared into the night before disappearing into the wilderness. When Ethan returned home, he found David waiting anxiously on the porch. As soon as he saw Ethan, he ran into his arms. "Did you save him?" he asked. Ethan smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "Yes, Scout is safe, and so is the reserve." As the days passed, David's love for the reserve deepened. Inspired by Ethan's bravery and Scout's resilience, he vowed to one day become a protector of the wild, just like his newfound father. Ethan knew that their story was just beginning. Together, they would continue to fight for the animals, ensuring that the reserve remained a sanctuary for all creatures, great and small. And with Scout watching over them from the wild, they knew they were never truly alone.